find it's always better to fire people on a Friday.
I work in an extremely old building. My office is just like a small resource room that's inside the library. The first incident took place a little over a month ago. We were going through a grieving period on campus, and while I had no connection to who had passed, I couldn't help but wonder if perhaps it was them. I was sitting in my office with the lights dimmed, as I usually work better that way. I was so focused on my laptop that when I took a moment to write some notes down and I looked back up, I saw what appeared to be a tall, slouchy figure behind me for a second, and then it suddenly took off. I was so scared and caught off guard because I could see the shadow reflecting on my wall. My desk faces it. I followed it with my eyes as I saw the shadow slowly move on the wall. However, I was too scared to turn around, and I remained in my seat for a moment before I gathered the courage to get my things and leave. I will never forget that feeling. It was as if my blood had run cold and my breath was caught in my throat. I felt frozen and scared to death. The second instance was right before we left for the Christmas break. The same scenario again, where the lights were dimmed and I was heavily focused. Except this time, I didn't feel scared. I looked from my laptop at the wall in front of me for a brief second, and I saw the shadow walk slowly right behind me. It felt different somehow. The energy didn't feel threatening, but just calm. Something overcame me and I simply laughed and said something along the lines of, "Hello there, want some peppermint candy?" And as soon as I said that, it went away. I don't know why I chose to speak to it. It just kind of came out without me thinking. I truly don't know if it was the same entity as the first, but strange nonetheless. That very same day, my sister said she also saw something later that afternoon as she works during the evenings. She and her co-worker were needing a pair of sticky notes, and as my sister sat in one of the chairs in my room, which faced directly to the door entrance, she looked up from her phone briefly and saw what she describes to be a tall, shadow figure zooming past my door. She thought it was a student at first, but realized that it couldn't have been since they had already been dismissed. The lights in the library were off, and the only light shining was from my office. But she claims to have seen it clear as day. It freaked her out, but nothing really new to her since she tended to see a lot of shadow people. Anyways, I just felt like sharing this because I've never experienced something like this before. And if anyone has any thoughts as to what this could be, I would appreciate it.
All the guards at my workplace know this theatre is haunted. We're all used to the super eerie feelings down in the lower levels, backstage areas. Most of it can be passed off as long work hour stress. But there is definitely some evil stuff in this building with us. It's probably an entity that's latched itself onto the themes like theatrics and whatnot. I don't know. We've got all kinds of stories. We have all heard the grand piano playing on its own in the night. We've all heard ghostly whispers arguing every now and then as we walk through the halls. Sometimes I smell a harsh burning in the halls at night, like sulfur. We all know that doesn't mean well. Tonight has been the worst it's ever been. I heard a door slam shut nearby as I was patrolling. As a joke, I yelled out, "Who it be?" Inside joke with me and my friends to lighten my nerves. And I heard a deep, almost unintelligible male voice saying, "It be me." This may sound kinda funny, but I did not enjoy that. My Bluetooth earphones, they blatantly refused to work tonight. I also walked through one of the function halls in darkness. Once the building closes, we patrol without many lights on, other than the occasional safety lights here and there. And I saw something following me in the mirror. I refused to look behind me or stare at that mirror too long, but it appeared to be a figure clearly dressed in a costume of a king, with a big fur robe and a black, jagged crown. Its head was tilting side to side as it shuffled along behind me, kind of like a key-winded toy. It moved so soundlessly, so I was pretty startled. I couldn't feel my legs out of dread, so I didn't even stop walking. I just stopped looking immediately, and I calmly kept walking out of the room, pretending to see nothing. I think this is happening due to the current performance of a really old and famous play called Faust. A very famous actor died performing it here in Melbourne a long time ago in another theatre nearby, and his ghost allegedly haunts that theatre till this day. It's not too far down the road from our theatre. There is also a secret warehouse on site, the location of which, for obvious reasons, we do not share with the public. But this warehouse, it's basically a storage room full of really old and valuable artifacts. Things that have to do with early modern theatre and music. Authentic historical pieces, like 18th century instruments and old chests or trunks that belong to people of fame. One-of-a-kind tapes, recorded by famous rock and blues musicians. Old stage set models, some of them dating all the way back to the 1800s. It's crazy. I know for a fact that some of these old artifacts, they bring with them the presence of beings potentially even older than them. You couldn't pay me enough to open some of these creepy-looking trunks. Safe to say, I'm glad I'm casual now, and I no longer work full-time. I've been working here for almost a year, and it is hands down the most haunting place that I've ever experienced.
I work in investments, Wall Street hours. My building is a classic downtown glass skyscraper, but the floors were remodeled recently. Custom, state-of-the-art technology, coded locked doors, light sensors, the works. Every day I arrive at the office around 5:30 a.m. and am always the first person on the premises. Others drift in around 8 a.m. During COVID, we might have 5 employees total coming to work. Everyone else works remotely. This morning I arrived at my floor and everything was dark as usual. However, as soon as I entered through the coded security door, I heard a loud, female voice talking. Wow, I thought. People are coming back to the office. I was happy to have company. Lights popped on one by one as I advanced down the corridor to my office, and that's when I realized where the voice was coming from. The entire trading floor was black, except for my office, which was fully brightly lit, and the TV was blaring at full volume, behind a locked door. I stopped walking, bewildered, and looked around to see if anyone else was there, and I was alone. Lights on the entire floor were dark except for my office and where I was standing. I went into my office, turned off the TV, and started my day. 5 minutes later, the TV turned on again. I've been in this office for 7 months and am its first occupant. The motion lights will sometimes activate when I'm alone, but motion lights, who knows? To be honest, I've never imagined an office building being haunted. But this was a very strange start to my day, and I want to see what everyone thinks.
During my time at university, I had a part-time job at a huge Bavarian company. The building, it had 8 floors and a quadratic shape, with a big lobby hall in the center of the building. It actually was hundreds of years old, but completely renovated. I worked once or twice a week, mainly on weekends. Now, here's the interesting part. I worked in night shifts, and my job was basically to walk around the whole building twice a night. While walking through the hallways, I just had to watch out for stuff people forget when they rush into the weekend. Open doors, open windows, or light switches still turned on, that kind of thing. Nothing out of the ordinary, and the pay was good. In fact, I was kinda surprised about how good the pay was, because obviously I didn't have to do much in those 8 hours. My girlfriend and other friends, they mentioned that the pay was just fair, as I had to walk around a huge building at night, completely alone. They always mentioned how they would never do this. Sometimes, my girlfriend visited me there to bring me some meals, as the sinister feeling in buildings like these would play mind games with them. I never had problems with being alone. Neither was I paranoid or believed in paranormal occurrences. Just studied throughout the night and did my 2 walks. Until this one night, in September 2018. The shift started like any other. I got the keys from the janitor and I started studying, after my walk through the building, of course. Between 3:55 a.m. and 4:05 a.m., the entire electronic system throughout the building resets, which I found really odd at my first shift, but I grew to ignore it after some months. The janitor explained the reason after I asked. The reset, it leads to light sources turning on and off throughout the whole building, systematically, but still chaotic. I sat at the front desk, not even paying attention to it, when suddenly, a certain noise reached me. One of the 2 elevated doors in the first floor opened itself, closed itself, and opened itself again. Malfunction, I thought, going back to reading boring science papers. After 20 minutes, it happened again, but this time, the light in the elevator, it switched off, which seemed really odd. At this point, I started to feel a little bit alarmed. When I moved into the elevator, the door behind me, it closed. I panicked and I tried to get out of the elevator, but the elevator started moving and it took me to the 2nd floor in complete darkness. When I reached the 2nd floor, the door opened and I basically fell out of the elevator door, turning around while I fell. The sinister looking, completely dark elevator closed again and took off to another floor. My heart was racing, and a part of me thought someone manipulated the console. But another part of me felt something else. Fear. I had goosebumps all over my body and returned to the front desk with the plan to text my supervisor and the janitor about a technical defect of the elevator. I did this with trembling hands, when suddenly I heard another distant noise. Radio music from somewhere in the canteen. I slowly moved down to the canteen with my smartphone light switched on. The noise, it came from the kitchen, and I followed it. Reaching the kitchen, I saw that a radio was playing music on some of the tables. The cooks, they listened to radio while working. I froze, and I couldn't breathe. During my first walk, the janitor texted me and told me to put the radio under a certain desk and switch it off, as the cooks would always store it there. I did this directly when I started my shift, even texting him, because I couldn't find the desk at first, after plugging out the radio. I turned around and I sprinted through the canteen, directly to an exit, and I waited outside for the last 2 hours. Luckily, I had the keys with me when someone for the day shift came. When he arrived, I got into the building with him. I took my bag and I left quickly. I called myself in sick for the next 2 weeks, and after that, I quit that job, using excuses like it's disrupting my sleep cycle, etc. Till this day, I have no idea what happened that night.
I am now 29 and work as a security guard doing nights in the UK. The site I usually do my duty at is in the northwest of England, but I will not give the name of the site or specific area to keep my job secure. This is going to be a long-winded post, but I'm confident that anybody interested in the paranormal will be satisfied. So here goes. So I was in the army at the time when one of my closest friends landed this job first. He was always a very hardcore skeptic, but started to tell me that he was experiencing things that were weird and freaking him out sometimes. After the army, I went into a couple of random jobs whilst I got my momentum back in regular life, and also got myself a SIA license. Eventually my pal got shipped off to another site for the same customer, and I jumped at the opportunity to work in his place. My pal, let's call him Jason, kindly drove me to the site for my induction to meet the guard on duty that night. The guard on duty was a very down-to-earth man in his 50s, and after showing me the ropes, the whole 5 minutes, he asked me what I think about poltergeists. I told him briefly about some of the experiences I have had throughout my life, and his eyes lit up, which sparked a casual friendship ever since. Basically, he told me about 2 guards leaving in the past due to strange things happening at this site, and that every guard has experienced at least one thing there. He is a lot deeper into this stuff than I am, but it adds to his harmless charm, and we have shared many deep conversations about the subject. Saturday night, during the Christmas holidays in 2018, I locked myself in for the first time, and ready to spend the next 12 hours alone enjoying my own company and getting paid for it. Gaming laptop straight out, albeit on whisper volume of course, and frequent heads up in case of intruders or van drivers coming to collect their personal vehicles. This place is quite creepy looking, as it is out in the sticks somewhat, and surrounded by farmland. But I am very used to cutting about in the dark in places similar from my time in the army, so it was just whatever to me. For the first few shifts, I just heard the odd strange noise, which quite frankly could have been anything from temperature expansion and contraction to wildlife. However, on the night prior to the staff returning to work for 2019, I had one of the most profound paranormal experiences of my life, which genuinely scared me. It was the 3 a.m. to 4 a.m. hourly patrol. I stepped off at about 3:30, and as I put one foot out of the guardroom door, a tiny stone whizzed around the guardroom, bouncing off the metal lockers, desk, etc. At head to torso height. I am 6 foot tall. This didn't make any sense, but I shrugged it off and continued on my way. The first part of my patrol involved walking around the back of a 2-story medium-sized office building, where there are lots of stone pebbles to walk on before coming out from the back of the offices and onto a relatively large car park, about 2/3 the size of a football pitch. As soon as I stepped foot on the tarmac, a pebble landed next to me, and I thought nothing of it. I could have easily kicked one up a bit with my steel-toed boots and not felt it. Whatever. I got halfway across this car park, and another landed just in front of me, as if it came from behind me. This is where I started to feel things weren't quite right, as the pebbles were way back by this point, and I would have felt it this time due to the added force of it. I continued, and at the end of the car park were a row of shipping containers on the left and a huge biffa skip on the right. The patrol route takes me walking between these for about 30 meters, and this is by far the creepiest part of the site, as it's so dark and dingy. This is where things began to get intense. I was still walking towards this area, and roughly 20 meters away when another pebble hit the biffa skip loudly, about 5 to 6 feet high. In other words, I would have had to get a bit of a run-up and put effort into booting a pebble hard enough to get it high enough to match the force it hit with. This really startled me, and I stood still and confused for about 30 seconds looking all around myself, but there was nobody, and I was equipped with a 400 lumen heavy-duty torch, so I could see for quite a distance. Nobody whatsoever. I reluctantly carried on out of duty down the alley, past the skip that had just been hit and the shipping containers to my left. I'd gotten about 10 meters past the first shipping container when it sounded as if somebody ran up to it with a sledgehammer and gave it a massive whack. My backside almost swallowed my pants whole, and it took every ounce of courage to immediately run back to the car park and shine my torch in all directions. If this was a human due to the layout of the site, they could not have gotten away in time unless they could contest Usain Bolt. And even that would be a stretch considering it probably took me 2 seconds to sprint there, if that. The guard that gave me the induction is that interested in this stuff that he told me to call him if anything like this happens, no matter the hour. So I continued to the center of the car park to get a full field of view of the site, but of course, nobody. Suddenly I just heard bang, 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 coming from all directions but confined to within the site. Shortly followed by tiny stones constantly whizzing past my shins with a low trajectory, similar to how one would throw skimming stones across a body of water. The thing is about these stones whizzing past me is that the direction they were coming from was a huge 3-story high warehouse with no windows or doors from my point of view. So these tiny stones were being thrown at me from an unseen force for 100% certainty, as all that was there was 3 stories of brick wall. Never once did any of them hit me, just whizzed past my legs left and right. Behind this warehouse is a river that gets quite choppy in the winter, but even so, the trajectory dictated that the stones were definitely being thrown from in front of me and not over the warehouse, which would be next to an impossible feat anyway. I rang the other guard, and he could immediately hear the racket going on. He told me to go by the river and call out to it. Now, despite having a few experiences sparsely throughout my life, I've never been interested in engaging with whatever the phenomena is, but I decided to humor him anyway, all the while crapping my pants. I called out to it. I can't remember what I said, and everything immediately stopped and went silent. Nothing further happened that night, and the other guard said he's never known anybody to get terrorized quite that badly by it. Once the staff arrived, I spoke to one of the blokes managing the site, and he said he would check the CCTV footage for any messes. Interestingly, the next shift a couple of days later, the cleaner who used to be around for a couple of hours after the staff leave called me into the office block to see a document printed out of an email. This was my security firm about the events, but stated that they could not see anybody or any stones on camera, but could see me doing an intense investigation and being violently startled a few times. Since then, I have had very sparse experiences, such as doors slamming, a filled mop bucket moving 3 feet from the wall in front of my eyes, plates smashing in the canteen. Very annoying, as security often gets the blame for this, understandably. Cutlery having a quick jangle in the canteen drawer, a loud sound of what can only be described as heavy cardboard boxes being dragged along the dusty warehouse floor, and footsteps coming from the room above. A few months into the job, I also got another very close friend a job there, who was also in the army prior and also a massive skeptic until now. He literally laughed at myself and Jason whilst we gave him his induction when we mentioned the strange stuff. Jason to this day references his cocky laugh, as his attitude soon got set straight. So a few nights into my other friend, let's call him Scott, working there, I get woken up to a phone call at about 1:30 a.m. and it is Scott with a trembly voice saying that somebody has just sprinted up the stairs, ran through the short corridor, and is currently stood outside the guardroom door. I said, "Well, you're a security guard. Do your job and see who it is." Of course, nobody was there, and nobody could be there due to coded doors. I haven't experienced anything paranormal there for a long time now. It seems to have weeks, months of calm, followed by short bursts of activity. I've also since branched out and done all of the sites my company contracts with, and never had an experience elsewhere, besides one place to which I have video evidence of, but am reluctant to share, and even then I need permission from the guard who works that particular site. I've even worked at a number of derelict, creepy old mills, with nothing strange going on. Hope you enjoyed my story.
Let me start off by saying it took a lot of convincing to even share my story. I don't know what to feel. What I do know, as of typing this, the activity is ramping up tenfold. I'm weary of sharing any actual names, including my own, as you might see why. And before you go off, immediately writing this off as someone high off crack, trying to make a poor excuse for a ghost story, I assure you, I'm not. This is my story, that myself and 3 others know of. I'm not here to convince you of anything. I'm only here for 2 reasons. To see if anyone has had the same experience and/or can help me in ridding this thing away from me. So with all that out of the way, let's begin. I will name myself X. I was 21 at the time of this incident. I'm now 22. I worked many different jobs, mainly the food industry. My father was part of the HQ staff of a security company, one that still operates today. I eventually decided to try my hand in something completely different. Security, of course. I worked for the company for about 8 months as a level 2 officer. And after about 1 year, I moved up to level 3. Level 3 is someone authorized to carry and handcuff, according to the company's policies and clients' policies. I was moved to my first ever post as a level 3, a hospital located in San Antonio. I will not give out the name. Anyways, I worked at said hospital for about 3 months, until I was told that there was an abandoned section of the hospital. I was offered a tour. Before I go further, I should explain who was with me upon entering the abandoned section. First up is Agent Y. Agent Y was a former Secret Service agent who retired and eventually ended up in the security company I was in. Next up is Marine 1 and 2. As the name suggests, these 2 were former Marines. One was infantry, who was in the Battle of Fallujah and continued to see more action for another 6 years before leaving. Marine 2 was a former drill instructor. I'm saying this as a point of reference to show you that these people were not some wannabe thugs taken off the street to become some lousy security officers. In fact, 70% of the company are of military or law enforcement background. Anyways, Agent Y was my supervisor of the site. Each site needed a supervisor. I won't go into detail about that. Agent Y also so happened to be the hospital's main security supervisor. Agent Y and Marine 1 and 2 all went with me to the abandoned section. We all had our own flashlights. We explored essentially the whole building without any incident, until we reached the ICU. God damn it. I'm crying as I type this. This is gonna haunt me until I die. We reached the ICU. We were stopped as there was a 3-way fork. Each hall, it had a miniature hall connecting to the next. All 3 hallways were parallel to each other. We decided on the far left one, and we continued down. The plan was to go down all the way, circle back, and take the next hallways. If it weren't for what I was about to experience, it was almost entrancing to see all the equipment and whatnot just left there to rot. We reached the end of the first hallway when, before all of us could turn around, Agent Y was the first to notice the Marine 2 was fixated on a doorway. When we all turned in the direction of Marine 2, I immediately felt sick, like I was going to vomit violently. It started to smell like rotten meat. This all took within a span of about 3 seconds. When we all faced the doorway, we all immediately noticed it. It was peeking at us from the top of the doorway. God, I need to step away for a moment. It stared at us from the top of that doorway. I was more immediately drawn to its eyes. I would have expected normal eyes, but was instead met with inky blackness. There were voids where its eyes should have been. Marine 1 was the first to run, followed by Marine 2. I then ran next, my heart beating fast. As I was running, I noticed Agent Y outrunning me. For some god-awful reason, I was compelled to turn around to see if it was chasing us. The damn thing was floating towards us. From here, I'm not quite sure what happened, as my brain essentially blacked out. But what I do know is that a few months later, the abandoned building was destroyed. I genuinely wish that it would stop here, but it gets worse. Agent Y, 3 weeks after the building's demolition, he committed suicide. A few days later, Marine 1 died under unknown circumstances. I tried to live my life without an acknowledgement of what I saw, but I still see that godforsaken thing in the corner of my eye. I fear I'm next. Any advice would be of genuine help. Update. About 5 days ago, I eventually got a priest who performed an exorcism on the house. The entity was only kept at bay for some time, but eventually decided to not only torment me, but rather Marine 2 as well. They seem to have taken the brunt of this thing's anger. This shit is starting to sound more and more unbelievable, but I genuinely wish that this was all a joke. God, I wish it was. Final update. Thank you for your feedback, but I can't take it anymore. It's messing with me every day, and it's getting worse and worse.
Back in 2015, I was working at a company with a very old building. This building is located behind or at the very end of a historic area. This complex is often visited by tourists. Major events are usually held there, and it's been an iconic place since the 70s. Apparently, the building was once their office, At the time of this story, the company was to be holding an exhibit. My team and I decided to stay overnight to make the scale model of the product we'll be displaying. Around midnight, my team evacuated from our space to the graphic designer's conference room since their table is huge. The table is at the center with 2 wooden office tables behind it. There are 5 people in my team, including myself. One of my team members stayed at our own space. Let's call her A. 2 of us went into the conference room, B and myself. We're both female. While the 2 remaining members decided to go out and eat, D and E, who are both male. I sat facing B, the 2 tables behind me. While we're building a part of the scale model, I noticed someone moving near one of the office tables behind me, in the corner of my eye. I turned my head in that direction. There was no one. I thought A came in without us noticing, but then I realized it can't be A, because the woman I saw is too tall. I faced B. Once again, I see the woman moving. I can recognize that it's a woman. I can see her wearing a uniform. She's wearing a pencil skirt, like a normal employee. She's constantly moving. I decided to tell B about it. She didn't believe me. She didn't see anything, and considering she's facing that area, I told her that it's a woman that I can only see in my peripheral vision, but when I full-on look, she disappears. We hurriedly continued building our scale model so we could get out of there quickly. More than 30 minutes later, we evacuated and settled in the main office. This location has the typical office dividers. B and I sat on the floor, her back against one of the dividers. Later, A joined us. We were using the power outlet to use the electric file tool for our scale model, when suddenly, I felt something land on the back of my head. Everything happened so fast. A and B screamed and quickly stood up. I saw 3 crumpled papers in front of me. B ran to the lobby. We followed her, terrified. A said maybe D and E were pulling a prank on us, but 3 minutes later we spotted D and E coming into the building carrying our food that we asked them to buy. We went back to the main office. I straightened the papers. One of them had something written on it.
I found this in the bathroom.
The other 2 were blank. B said those papers came from the other side of the divider. Since we're the only ones there, who could have thrown the crumpled papers? We freaked out, but continued our work because we're rushing. Moments later, I was searching my phone and decided to go back to our department. To get there, I had to walk down the center hall, in between rows and rows of dividers. That's when I saw a figure again, this time a male. I saw him for a split second walking in front of me. He's wearing a white shirt and jeans, with very black hair and a bowl cut. He looks skinny, like a teenager. I saw him 3 times after that, until we decided to go home. Weeks later, after we had our egress, my fellow designers hung out and we told our ghost stories. One of my colleagues, she's not part of our team, said she recently saw a guy in the main office wearing a white shirt and jeans. I then asked her, does this guy also have black hair and a bowl cut? She replied, yeah, his hair looks like one of the Beatles. More ghosts are lurking in that complex. That building is now abandoned.
Hello watchers and listeners, thank you so much for watching. As always, a big thank you to all of the Reddit users who kindly allowed me to use their stories. If you want to help support this channel, you will find links to both my Patreon and my Teespring store in the description below, so feel free to have a look. And the biggest thank you to all of you who continue to support me. I truly do appreciate it. And remember,
Papa loves you.